The Golden State Warriors finished the 2025-26 regular season with a 37-45 record and failed to qualify for the playoffs. It was a painful result for a franchise that not long ago was considered one of the most dominant forces in the NBA. Fans across the Bay Area entered the offseason expecting bold moves, major acquisitions, and a clear signal from the front office that the organization was serious about returning to contention. Instead, what they got was something far more subdued and far more strategic. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates! As the dust settles on another quiet summer in Golden State, one name keeps coming up in discussions about the team's long-term blueprint: Nikola Jokic. The three-time MVP out of Denver is quietly becoming the cornerstone of a cap space plan the Warriors have been assembling behind the scenes, and every major roster decision this offseason seems to point in that direction. Here is the situation: Stephen Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Brandon Podziemski, and Charles Bassey are all without contracts for the 2027-28 season. Kristaps Porzingis, meanwhile, has only $3 million of his $20 million contract guaranteed for that same year. What that creates, in theory, is a massive amount of financial flexibility, the kind of flexibility that would allow the Warriors to pursue a max contract player in the summer of 2027. And the biggest max contract player expected to be available at that point is Jokic himself. The Serbian center holds a player option worth approximately $62.8 million for the 2027-28 season, a figure he is widely expected to decline. He has publicly stated that he plans to wait until after the upcoming season before committing to an extension, which technically puts him on a path toward free agency, even if his true intention is to remain with the Nuggets long-term. That uncertainty is exactly the kind of scenario the Warriors are banking on, and it raises an obvious question: is this plan realistic, or is Golden State setting itself up for a massive disappointment? The honest answer is that the odds are stacked against them. For the Warriors to land Jokic, multiple things would have to go right simultaneously. First, Jokic would need to decline his player option and genuinely test the open market rather than simply using free agency as leverage to extract a better deal from Denver. Second, the Nuggets would need to have a bad enough season that Jokic loses confidence in the organization's ability to compete for a championship. Third, and perhaps most critically, Jokic would need to actually choose Golden State over every other franchise pursuing him. That last point is where things get especially complicated. Stephen Curry will be 39 years old by the time the 2027 free agency window opens. Jokic has consistently shown a preference for competing at the highest level, and pairing with an aging superstar on an otherwise thin roster is not exactly an enticing proposition. To clear enough cap room to offer Jokic a maximum contract, the Warriors might also be forced to part ways with Butler, further weakening their current core. The supporting cast Jokic would inherit in Golden State would likely be inferior to what he already has in Denver, even accounting for the Nuggets' recent difficulties. There is also the real possibility that Jokic never reaches free agency at all. The Nuggets could offer him an extension this season, and despite his stated intention to wait, financial security and loyalty to an organization that has supported him throughout his career could easily persuade him to stay put. So if Jokic does not come to Golden State, and the probability strongly suggests he will not, what does all of this cap space actually buy? The answer is likely something that resembles what the Los Angeles Lakers accomplished this past offseason. The Lakers used their financial flexibility to absorb Walker Kessler in a trade involving 2 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps, then added role players like Quentin Grimes, Sandro Mamukelashvili, and Colin Sexton to round out their depth. Those are solid, useful players, but none of them are difference makers capable of pushing a team from mediocrity into championship contention. That is the uncomfortable reality facing the Warriors. Their grand 2027 cap space strategy could yield exactly the kind of moderate upgrades that satisfy no one. The list of potential free agents that summer includes players like Giannis Antetokounmpo, Karl Anthony Towns, and Kevin Durant, all of whom hold player options and have shown no serious intention of leaving their current teams. Anthony Davis could theoretically opt out, but at 34 years old and on a maximum salary, he presents a significant risk-reward calculation that even the most optimistic Warriors fan would struggle to justify. The Warriors spent an entire offseason clearing the financial decks for a shot at a generational player. Whether that gamble pays off depends almost entirely on decisions being made far away from the Bay Area. And for a franchise with championship expectations, that is a deeply uncomfortable position to be in. The plan is bold, but bold plans have a way of becoming cautionary tales when the variables refuse to cooperate. The conversation around the Golden State Warriors this offseason has been defined by a single phrase repeated over and over again: mortgaging the future. Critics argue that giving up multiple first-round picks to help a 38-year-old Stephen Curry compete for one more championship run would be an act of organizational recklessness. A short-sighted move that would saddle the franchise with consequences long after its superstar retires. But that framing, while popular, misses something important. There is a version of a major trade that actually makes sense for Golden State, and it does not require blowing up the future to make it work. The Warriors find themselves at a delicate crossroads. They need to be better right now, while also preserving the assets that will matter once the Curry era concludes. The question is not whether they should make a move. It is which move carries the best combination of immediate impact and long-term flexibility. According to analysis from Sports Illustrated, there are two distinct paths the Warriors could take, and understanding the difference between them is essential to evaluating whether the front office is actually being smart or simply being passive. The first path involves trading a relatively modest package of draft capital for a player whose impact significantly exceeds the price paid. The classic model for this approach is the move that saw the Boston Celtics acquire Derek White from San Antonio. At the time, White was considered a reliable but unspectacular player, a low-end starter with good defensive instincts and inconsistent three-point shooting. The Celtics gave up a 2022 first-round pick that became the 25th overall selection, a future first-round pick swap, and some salary filler. What they got in return was a player who went on to make 3 consecutive all-defensive teams, dramatically improved his shooting, and became one of the key contributors on their championship contending rosters. The trade is now widely viewed as one of the most lopsided in recent NBA history, in Boston's favor. The Warriors have not appeared to be seriously pursuing this kind of creative, low-cost, high-reward move. The front office seems reluctant to think outside the box in the way a transaction like the White deal required. To replicate it, Golden State would need to identify an undervalued player on a struggling team, someone whose skills have not yet been fully maximized, and be willing to act boldly before another team recognizes the opportunity. A trade packaging a 2027 first-round pick and a future swap, for example, would not constitute mortgaging the future if the player acquired delivers White-level production. But so far, there is little evidence the Warriors are pursuing this type of deal. The second path is the one Golden State has reportedly been exploring, and it centers on Trey Murphy, author of the New Orleans Pelicans. This approach is fundamentally different. Instead of finding hidden value at a low cost, it involves paying a significant price for a player whose trade value is expected to remain high enough that the Warriors could eventually flip him for a comparable return. Murphy, 24 years old and under contract at a favorable rate for 3 more seasons, is considered one of the most appealing trade targets in the entire league. He is a versatile wing who can shoot, defend, and function within a system that maximizes movement and spacing, exactly what a Stephen Curry-centered offense requires. The Pelicans have reportedly set their asking price at 3 unprotected first-round picks plus a quality young player. That is a steep cost by any measure, but the argument for meeting it rests on Murphy's contract situation. Because he is locked in at a below-market rate for 3 additional seasons, his trade value is essentially insulated from the kind of depreciation that affects older, more expensive players. If the Warriors acquire him now and later decide to move him before his deal expires, they should be able to attract a strong return, potentially recouping 2 of the 3 picks they spent to get him. Proposed packages involve picks in 2027-2030 with existing lottery protections and 2032. The 2027 selection carries less long-term risk given that Curry is still playing at an elite level and the team should be competitive. The 2030 and 2032 picks are more valuable, but if Murphy performs as expected and the Warriors can attract buyers willing to include their own future assets, the net cost over time becomes far more manageable. There are real risks involved. Murphy could suffer a serious injury. Curry's performance could decline sharply, making the 2027 pick far more valuable than anticipated and turning it into a high lottery selection rather than a late first. And there is always the possibility that no team would match the price paid when it comes time to sell. But doing nothing carries its own risks. A poor season hurts ticket revenue, weakens the team's competitive standing, and chips away at the Curry legacy in his final years. The Warriors must find the courage to act decisively, and Trey Murphy III represents the most responsible version of the bold trade they need to make. The Golden State Warriors thought they had a deal for Kawhi Leonard in February. Then the Clippers pulled out at the last moment, the window slammed shut, and Leonard was eventually traded to the Toronto Raptors at the beginning of July. That appeared to be the end of the story, another chapter in the Warriors' long and frustrating off-season narrative of near, misses, and almost moves. But a shocking new development has thrown the entire situation back into uncertainty, and Golden State may have just been handed an unexpected second chance. The trade sending Leonard from the Los Angeles Clippers to Toronto was officially placed on hold just 9 days after it was announced. The reason? Both franchises are currently under investigation for potential salary cap circumvention. The NBA must conclude that inquiry before the deal can be officially processed, and according to multiple reports, that investigation may not wrap up until sometime in 2027. Until then, Leonard remains in a kind of professional limbo. Not technically a Raptor, no longer a Clipper in any meaningful sense, and with his immediate future genuinely unresolved. Adding another layer of intrigue to the situation, ESPN's Ramona Shelburne reported that Leonard could actually end up returning to the Clippers if the Toronto trade ultimately falls apart. Speaking on NBA Today, Shelburne noted that Los Angeles would be comfortable welcoming the star forward back for an 8th season with the organization if circumstances required it. Leonard originally left the Clippers as a free agent in 2019, joining them that same summer after his title run in Toronto. The idea of him returning to Los Angeles, where he spent 5 seasons, is no longer the far-fetched scenario it would have seemed even a month ago. For the Warriors, this development is genuinely significant on multiple levels. The most immediate implication is straightforward: as long as the Toronto trade remains in limbo, Leonard has not definitively moved out of reach. Golden State was reportedly close to acquiring him at February's mid-season deadline before the Clippers withdrew from negotiations. The interest was mutual enough that the Warriors had constructed what they believed was a workable deal. That deal collapsed, but the underlying motivation to add a two-way impact player of Leonard's caliber has not disappeared. The more interesting dimension of this story involves timing. If the investigation drags into 2027 as reports suggest, it would align with a stretch where the Warriors' trade assets become considerably more attractive. By the 2026-27 midseason deadline, Draymond Green's contract will be expiring, Kristaps Porzingis will have only $3 million guaranteed on his deal, and Jimmy Butler, currently recovering from injury, will also be in the final year of his contract. An injured, expiring Butler actually becomes a more appealing trade piece in that context, particularly for a team willing to bet on his return to health. That combination of contracts gives Golden State real financial tools to construct a credible offer for Leonard. The 7-time All-Star put together arguably his finest individual season last year, averaging a career-high 27.9 points per game while finishing 7th in the MVP voting. His ability to score, defend, and dominate critical playoff moments without demanding the ball at all times would make him a near-perfect fit alongside Stephen Curry in Golden State's system. The Warriors have spent years searching for a co-star capable of shouldering the offensive burden that Curry cannot carry alone in the postseason, and Leonard, even factoring in his injury history, represents exactly the kind of proven elite talent they need. However, the same development that gives the Warriors hope also carries a direct competitive downside. If Leonard ends up back with the Clippers, Golden State faces a considerably more difficult challenge within the Pacific Division. The two teams met in the play-in tournament this past season, with the Warriors claiming a dramatic comeback victory. But that narrow margin of difference shifts significantly if Leonard returns to the Clippers roster for a full season. A player who averaged nearly 28 points per game while healthy is not someone any Western Conference team wants playing for a division rival. The Warriors currently sit in an uncomfortable middle ground, not talented enough to contend, but not quite bad enough to rebuild from the bottom. The Leonard situation, as uncertain as it remains, represents one of the few genuine wildcards still in play this offseason. Whether Golden State can ultimately capitalize on that uncertainty depends on how the investigation plays out and whether the front office has the creativity and the capital to act when the moment arrives. For Warriors fans, the Kawhi Leonard story is far from over.